"You don't matter anymore, Mum." He said it with a laugh, standing in his driveway, tossing a ball to his dog, like it was just another Tuesday. And maybe for him it was. Just a throwaway comment. Just another moment in a life that didn't include me anymore. I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. My hands stayed on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. Just like I was taught decades ago. I was parked across the street, engine off, windows cracked. I hadn't meant to stop. I had only been passing through on my way to the grocery store I no longer enjoyed visiting. It was a quiet street, still clean, suburban, comfortable. The kind of place we used to dream about when money was tight and the kids were still small. He didn't see me. That was the first thing that hurt. The second was that he didn't mention me. Not once. He was talking to someone, his wife, I assumed. Their voices drifted through the open kitchen window, light and casual, like they had no weight at all. "We'll just throw out the rest," she said. "There's no point keeping it." He agreed. "Yeah, I already took what mattered." There was a pause, then her voice again. "Did she ever ask about it?" "Nah," he replied. "She doesn't even know." And that's when something inside me went still. I didn't know what they were talking about. Not exactly, but I knew the tone. I knew the way people speak when they're brushing away something they think is insignificant. Something or someone they believe won't notice. The dog barked. The front door closed. Silence returned to the house like it always did after they'd finished with whatever conversation didn't concern me. Across the street, I sat there for another 3 minutes. I watched the curtains flutter. I listened to a lawnmower start 2 houses down. And I thought about all the things I had let go of for them. Birthdays missed, so they could go to camp. Dinners skipped to save money for college. My own retirement postponed, so they wouldn't feel the squeeze of a mortgage. And now here I was. I turned the key in the ignition and backed out slowly, careful not to make a sound. I didn't want him to know I'd been there. Not yet. The drive home was short, but every corner felt unfamiliar. I'd driven these streets for years, school pickups, late-night pharmacy runs, quiet Sunday drives to clear my head. But now they felt like someone else's neighborhood, like I was trespassing in a life that used to include me. The moment I got home, I went to the garage. The space felt emptier than usual. That's when I remembered my car was gone. Not the one I used every day. The other one. The old sedan. The one that had sat under a tarp in the corner for years. The one my husband had driven. The one we'd taken on road trips before the kids were born. The one he'd taught our son to drive in. And then it clicked. He had sold it. I walked to the space where it used to be and stood there, hands by my side, trying to feel something, anger, grief, anything that would rise and break the dam. But nothing came, just a hollow ache that settled somewhere behind my ribs. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't told me. He'd taken it. And worst of all, I remembered what was inside it. The glove box. People forget glove boxes. They treat them like junk drawers. But mine wasn't. That glove box held something I'd placed there the week my husband died. A small black envelope. Thick. Tied with a faded ribbon from the last gift he ever gave me. Inside was a letter. His last words. Written in handwriting I'd recognize in any light at any distance. It was meant for our son. I hadn't given it to him after the funeral. I wasn't ready. I'd told myself it would mean more when he was older, when he needed it most. And then time passed, and things got complicated, and somehow I never found the moment. But I'd kept it safe. Until now. Until it was sold with the car like an afterthought. Traded in for a check or a favor or something else I'd never be told about. That letter, those words, were now out in the world, unopened, unread, and lost. Unless... I grabbed my phone. Searched my email. Scrolled through deleted messages, old receipts, anything that might hold a clue. And then I found it a pickup confirmation, sent from my son's account 2 weeks ago. The car had been donated to a local auction company. No sale price. Just a donation for tax write-off purposes. Of course, I should have been furious. I should have called him right then. But all I felt was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that settles into your bones after years of being overlooked. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the light off. I let the silence stretch around me, let it settle like dust on old furniture. And I remembered his voice. That one sentence. That throwaway line. "You don't matter anymore, Mom." He hadn't meant it, I told myself. But deep down, I knew the truth. He had. And I knew without saying a word, without raising my voice, that this story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. There was a time I believed that if I gave enough, loved enough, forgave enough, I'd be safe from this kind of pain. That if I made myself small and useful, they'd never forget what I meant to them. But I was wrong. And the mistake wasn't in how I loved, it was in thinking love guaranteed anything in return. I came from a generation of women who didn't ask for much. We held families together quietly. We didn't expect applause or appreciation. We just kept going. I did too. I built my life around my family, around meals on time, shirts, ironed, bills paid, and smiles offered even on the days when I felt like falling apart. I sacrificed more than anyone ever knew, not because I was told to, but because it felt like the right thing to do. When I married, I became a wife. And when we had children, I gave myself over to motherhood completely. Every decision I made was through the lens of what they needed. My husband worked long hours, and I kept the rest of life running. Doctor's appointments, homework, grocery lists, holidays. I never dropped the ball. Not once. And when my son was born, I remember holding him for the first time and thinking, "You are everything." I poured everything I had into raising him well. He was bright, curious. He used to follow me around the kitchen, asking questions about the world. I never thought that boy, the one who used to draw pictures of our family in crayon and tape them to the refrigerator, would one day look at me like I was in the way. But people change. Life changes. When he became a teenager, the distance started. He didn't mean to hurt me at first. I think he was just trying to find himself, the way young people do. But little by little, his kindness became selective. His tone became clipped. Phone calls were rushed, then skipped. Eventually, I only saw him on birthdays and holidays, and even those became fewer with time. His wife didn't help. I won't pretend she was cruel. She was polite, even generous when others were around. But I always knew I wasn't wanted in their life. There was something tight in her smile, something that said, "You had your turn." She never said it outright, of course, but she didn't have to. The coldness lived in the pauses between her words, in the silence after my offers to help. She always found a way to close the door without slamming it. I tried to adjust. I really did. I stayed quiet when they made decisions without me. I smiled through dinner conversations I wasn't included in. I sat in the corner at family gatherings, folding napkins and refilling drinks, while they laughed at stories I didn't recognize. I convinced myself this was just what happened with time, that maybe it was natural for children to pull away to focus on their own lives. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. It wasn't distance, it was erasure. They weren't just growing up. They were growing past me. The shift became more obvious after my husband died. Grief changes everything. I thought maybe it would bring us closer, that we'd lean on each other, that we'd remember what really mattered. But instead, it gave them an excuse to rewrite everything. Suddenly, decisions that used to be shared became his alone. My son started handling the finances, the house, even small things like repairs or who got what. He called it taking the burden off my shoulders. But it didn't feel like help, it felt like being phased out. He asked for power of attorney just in case something happened. He told me it was for my safety. I agreed, not because I wanted to, but because I was too tired to argue. I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to be that kind of mother, the one who doesn't trust her own child. But little things added up. One day I noticed my husband's tools were missing from the garage. Another day, the old garden bench disappeared. "We're just cleaning up," he said. "It's time to let go of the clutter." I stayed quiet. Then they took over the bills, changed the internet service, cancelled a few of my subscriptions by mistake. My name was quietly removed from a few things and added to nothing new. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that they were just trying to help, that I was being paranoid, but it never stopped. And the worst part, they never asked what I wanted. I was still alive, still standing in my own home, but I was being treated like a guest in it. When they gave away the car, my husband's old car, I didn't even hear about it until I noticed the empty space in the garage. They didn't ask. They didn't tell me where it went. They just took it. And that car, it wasn't just a car. It held memories, road trips, arguments, laughter in the rain. I used to sit in the passenger seat, legs curled up, listening to the way he hummed along to the radio. That glove box had held our life insurance cards, maps, a photo strip from a beach trip 30 years ago. But now it was gone. Given away, like it meant nothing. And the boy I once raised, the one who used to kiss my cheek before bed, the one I stayed up nights rocking through fevers, he'd become a man who didn't see me anymore. He saw an obligation, a woman who'd served her purpose, a piece of furniture in the family narrative. They never said it out loud, but they didn't have to. The message was clear. I had outlived my usefulness. And for a while, I almost believed it. I started waking up with a heaviness in my chest. A kind of quiet grief that didn't come from loss alone, it came from being made invisible in the very life I built. Every day felt like I was slowly being erased, one decision at a time, one memory at a time. At first it was the car, but that was just the beginning. They began going through the house when I wasn't home. I'd come back from the grocery store or my short walks and notice things missing. Small things at first, an old lamp, a picture frame, the rug in the hallway. "Oh, we thought you didn't need that anymore," they'd say. "We're just helping you downsize." Downsize, I wasn't moving anywhere. I wasn't dying. I hadn't asked for help. But they'd already decided. I didn't need to be consulted, just managed. One afternoon, I came home and found strangers walking through the living room, a real estate agent showing possibilities. I wasn't even angry in that moment, I was stunned. I stood there like a guest in my own home, while they smiled and gestured toward things I had polished and dusted and lived in for decades. I pulled my son aside. I asked him calmly what was happening. He said they were just exploring options, that maybe it was time I considered something smaller. More manageable, he said, like I was some fragile thing that couldn't be trusted to decide where I lived. "But I'm still capable," I said. "This is my house." He sighed. That sigh the kind children use when they've decided you're no longer worth listening to. "We just want what's best for you. Best for me. But not by me." The worst part was how easily he justified it all. Every quiet theft, every decision made without me came wrapped in a ribbon of care. He thought he was being responsible, protective, but he never once asked what I actually wanted. And his wife. She stayed behind the scenes, but I knew her hand was in everything. Her smiles grew thinner, her voice clipped. I noticed how quickly she steered conversations away from anything emotional, anything that made me feel like I had a say. She started scheduling things on my behalf, appointments, donations, even repairs I hadn't requested. It was always presented as help, but I could feel the noose tightening. They wanted control, not because they needed it, but because they thought I no longer deserved it. One evening, I overheard them talking. They didn't know I was still in the hallway. She said, "She's going to forget everything soon anyway. Might as well sort it now." I stood there, frozen. I wasn't sick. I wasn't forgetful. But in their eyes, I was already fading. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about power and who got to decide what mattered. I found myself shrinking inside my own life. I stopped cooking. I stopped reading. I stopped calling old friends. What was the point? Even the few photos I'd kept on the shelves began to vanish. My favorite armchair was moved into storage. My books were boxed. My kitchen reorganized. Everything I had arranged, they quietly undid. I became a guest in the life I created. And then came the moment that broke me. One rainy afternoon, I walked past their house. I hadn't planned to. I was just out for air. I saw his car in the driveway. I paused. I hadn't seen him in weeks. I walked slowly, not meaning to stop, but something made me. A sound. Voices. Their kitchen window was cracked open. I stood by the hedge, hidden. And I heard her laughing about how easy it had been. "She doesn't even notice half the things we move," she said. "It's like managing a toddler, distract, remove, repeat." My son chuckled. "I feel bad sometimes," he said. "But honestly, this is smoother than I expected. Once we sell the house, we'll just move her into something smaller and let the lawyers handle the rest." "And the car?" she asked. "Gone." She never even asked. They laughed again. I stood there, soaked, my heart pounding in my ears. They had planned everything. Behind every small kindness was a strategy, a way to move me out without confrontation, without guilt. Just silence. They had taken everything, not just objects or property. They had taken my dignity, my voice, my place in the story. And I let them, because I wanted to believe they still loved me, because I thought silence would preserve the peace, because I didn't want to become the difficult mother, the one they talked about behind closed doors. But in that moment, standing in the rain, I realized something cruel and undeniable. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were hoping I'd disappear on my own. I stopped talking. Not in a dramatic way. I still said, "Thank you" at the pharmacy, "good morning" to the neighbor, and "I'm fine" when asked. But something inside me had gone quiet, as if the last thread holding me together had finally given way. After hearing their conversation through that window, I went home and sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours. My hands were still cold from the rain, my coat soaked. I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't speak. I just sat there and began to doubt myself. Maybe I was being difficult. Maybe I was forgetful, too slow, too emotional. Maybe I did need help more than I'd ever admit. After all, I had raised them. I had trusted them. Surely they weren't cruel. Surely they thought they were doing what was right. I began rehearsing their excuses in my own mind. "She's lonely. She's not as sharp as she used to be. She'll thank us later." Those voices, their voices echoed in my head, louder than my own. And soon, mine started to fade. I began to second-guess every memory, every choice I made. I wondered if I had misplaced things, if I really had asked them for help and just forgot, if I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. And once I started questioning my mind, it became so easy for them to keep taking. They brought over a box labeled important papers. They said they'd sort it for me. I let them. They changed my phone plan easier for us to manage, they said. I nodded. They took the mirror from my bedroom, too heavy a hazard. I didn't argue. They smiled at me like I was a child, spoke in gentle tones, asked me if I had eaten, if I'd remembered to take my vitamins. And though it made my stomach twist, I said thank you. I pretended it didn't hurt. I let them put their hands all over my life, rearranging it like furniture they no longer liked. I used to read every night before bed. Now the books were in boxes in the garage. I used to make tea in the morning and hum while waiting for it to steep. Now I sat in silence, staring out the window, forgetting why I walked into the kitchen. The worst part wasn't their betrayal. It was that I began betraying myself. I handed over pieces of my autonomy like little sacrifices just to keep the peace. I smiled through the discomfort, laughed when they mocked my old habits. I wanted so desperately to stay close to them, to feel included, that I was willing to disappear. I remember standing in front of the mirror one evening. My reflection didn't look like someone broken, but I was. My eyes looked tired, not from age, but from pretending. My voice, when I spoke, trembled, not because I was weak, but because I was silencing rage. And my hands, those same hands that once braided hair and packed lunches and folded laundry and cleaned cuts and held stories, now trembled as I reached for things that were no longer mine. They were erasing me gently, with smiles, with checklists, with soft voices and firm decisions. And the part of me that used to shout, that used to speak up, she was buried under years of being told to calm down, be grateful, trust us. They had convinced me I was fragile. And worse, I had started to believe it. I remember one night I spilled tea on the table. Just a splash, nothing dramatic. But I panicked. My hands shook as I reached for the cloth. My heart raced like a schoolgirl caught cheating. I could hear her voice in my head. See, this is why we worry about you. I wasn't afraid of the mess. I was afraid of their judgment. I was living in fear inside my own life. Even when they weren't in the room, their presence was heavy. Their decisions echoed. Their opinions lived in my cupboards, in the arrangement of my furniture, in the way I held my breath when I opened the mail, wondering what else had been changed for my benefit. And yet I said nothing, because saying something would make me the problem. It would confirm their suspicions that I was losing it, that I was too emotional, that I couldn't handle stress. So I smiled. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I thanked them when I wanted to beg for my life back. I nodded when they took things, because fighting would only give them more reason to take more. They had taken almost everything. My space, my voice, my sense of safety. But the most dangerous thing they took was my belief that I could still trust myself. And that was almost enough to make me disappear for good. Almost. One morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to comfort me, but had lately started to feel like a warning. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the drawer they hadn't thought to open, the small one in the nightstand. It didn't hold much. Just a few old letters, some receipts, and a flash drive. That flash drive had everything. Bank records, insurance policies, scanned copies of legal papers. My husband had been meticulous. He trusted banks less than he trusted himself. I used to roll my eyes at how paranoid he seemed. But now I silently thanked him. He had digitized everything and left it to me, just in case he had once said, pressing it into my hand. If anything ever happens, this is yours. I had forgotten about it in the storm of grief and noise and voices telling me I was no longer capable. But now, holding it in my hand, I remembered who I was, who I had always been. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused. I was grieving, and they had taken advantage of that. But now I had clarity, and I had evidence. From that day on, I started writing everything down: dates, conversations, changes made without my consent, times they'd visited and what they'd said. I made copies of every document they handed me. I stopped signing things without reading them, really reading them. If they asked me to, I'd say, "I'll get back to you." That one sentence unsettled them. They didn't like me pausing, thinking, reclaiming time. That was their first clue that I was no longer asleep. I also started remembering little things, things I had pushed aside, like how they always suggested I donate furniture I loved, how certain pieces of jewelry had quietly gone missing, but no one seemed to know how. How suddenly my mail was being redirected, and I hadn't noticed because they were helping me manage my bills. They had woven a net around me so gently I hadn't felt it tighten, but now I could feel every knot. So I started tugging. I requested bank statements, called service providers, checked titles and ownership records. Slowly I began undoing what they'd rearranged. They had transferred one account into joint names, mine and theirs. I reversed it. They had switched the deed of a small plot of land I inherited. I called the county office. I made appointments, I asked questions, and I did it all quietly. Because the same silence they had used to erase me was now my weapon. I played the same role they expected: the polite mother, the agreeable woman, the slightly forgetful, but still loving figure in their lives. But behind that mask, I was building something. I found a lawyer. Not the one they had recommended to make things easier. A new one. A woman around my age. She listened to me without rushing, without talking down to me. When I showed her what I'd collected, she raised an eyebrow and said, "You're sharper than they think." And that was the moment I knew I hadn't lost myself. I'd just been buried under their expectations. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I wasn't planning revenge. I was doing what I should have done from the beginning, protecting myself. My lawyer helped me rewrite my will, not out of spite, out of clarity. I made sure my wishes were documented in ways no one could twist. I added notes, explanations. I clarified what was mine and what they had no right to touch. We placed certain assets in trust. Others were locked behind new passwords and legal protections. I re-registered my car in my name alone. I reopened an account my husband had set up years ago, one they didn't know about. I transferred savings into it. And I told no one. I smiled at family dinners. I listened to their plans. I nodded when they spoke of retirement communities and downsizing and giving them power of attorney for convenience. I acted like I was considering it. But inside, I was writing the script of my freedom. One line, one step, one decision at a time. There was a moment I'll never forget. One of them brought over a glossy brochure for a senior living facility. "They've got great reviews," they said, flipping it open. "Spa movie nights, even bingo." They said it like they were offering me a gift. I smiled, took the brochure and folded it neatly. Inside I felt nothing. Not rage, not fear, just resolve. That was the moment I knew they still thought they were in control. Good. Because that meant I still had time. I used that time to prepare. Not just financially, but emotionally. I reached out to old friends, women I hadn't spoken to in years. One had gone through something similar. Her children had tried to sell her house while she was hospitalized. Another told me how her daughter had moved in temporarily and stayed for years, slowly dismantling her privacy. We shared stories, cried, laughed, reclaimed pieces of ourselves we thought were lost. Those calls became my lifeline. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't powerless. The day I truly knew I had taken my power back was simple. I was in the kitchen. The sun was rising. I made my tea, in the old ceramic mug they said was too chipped. I stood by the window, holding it in both hands. The warmth of it, the ritual, the solitude. It felt like a prayer, and I whispered to myself, You're not done. Because I wasn't. I had lost so much. My husband, my sense of place in their lives, my voice for a while. But not my mind, not my courage, and certainly not my will. They had counted on me being too broken, too soft, too dependent to fight back. But I wasn't fighting. I was rising, quietly, steadily, with purpose. And they had no idea what was coming. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing about that day seemed special. The sky was grey. Rain tapped gently against the windows. I had just finished folding laundry when the knock came sharp, impatient, like they'd already made up their minds about how the day would go. I opened the door, and there they were, both of them, smiling that kind of smile you give a child right before you take away their favorite toy and say, "It's for your own good." "We need to talk?" one of them said, stepping inside without waiting. The other followed eyes, scanning the living room, the kitchen, like they were taking inventory. Again, I said nothing. Just turned and walked to the kitchen table. Sat down. Waited. They sat too, but only after glancing at each other, a silent agreement rehearsed. That was the first clue that this wasn't a visit. It was a move. One of them pulled out a folder, paper clipped, organized, labeled. "We've been thinking," they started. "You've been under a lot of stress, alone, grieving, and we want to help." I nodded. Not because I agreed, because I wanted them to keep talking. "We found a wonderful place," the other added. "A senior residence. It's close by. We've toured it, spoke to the staff. It's perfect for you. Safe, peaceful. Safe, peaceful." Those words were never meant for me. They were meant to control me. Wrap me in silk so I wouldn't notice the cage. I stayed quiet. They took that as permission. They began flipping through documents. "If you sign these, we can help manage your estate, your finances, just until you're settled. It'll be so much easier this way." They slid a pen toward me. My hands stayed in my lap. And then I spoke softly, but clearly. "I won't be needing that facility." Their smiles wavered. I continued. "And I won't be signing anything today." The room shifted. The silence thickened. They looked at each other again, but this time the confidence cracked. "You don't understand one," said voice, rising just slightly. "This is for your own good." "You're not thinking clearly." I stood up, and for the first time in months, they sat back. "I understand exactly what this is," I said. "You've been making decisions behind my back, changing accounts, redirecting mail. You tried to sell my car. You moved things out of this house when you thought I wouldn't notice." Their mouths opened, but no words came out. I didn't give them time to regroup. "I know about the bank account," I continued, "the one you tried to add your name to. I know about the forged signatures, the missing jewelry, the locked drawers I found keys for. I know everything." One of them muttered, "We were just helping." "No," I interrupted. "You were helping yourselves." The truth hung there, thick as thunder. "I have legal counsel now." I added, my voice steady. "Everything has been documented, every change reversed, every attempt to assist recorded. You will not touch my estate. You will not move me out of my home. And from now on, every visit will be on my terms." For a long moment, they said nothing. Then came the anger. Predictable, defensive. "We were just trying to protect you." "You're being dramatic. You've changed." I smiled. "No. I just woke up." They stormed out. No hugs, no goodbye. Just slammed doors and tires screeching against wet pavement. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. This time it was mine, owned, claimed. I stood by the window and watched the rain slide down the glass. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel victorious either. What I felt was something deeper, older, like the steady breath you take after escaping a room that's been slowly filling with smoke. They had finally seen me. Not the version of me they wanted, soft, scared, dependent, but the real me. The woman they didn't think I had the strength to be anymore. That night, I made dinner for one, ate it slowly, lit a candle not for romance, but for remembrance of my husband, of myself, of all the quiet moments I had given away over the years without realizing their value. They may never come back, or they might, but they won't come back the same way, because now the door they used to walk through without knocking, it's locked. Not out of spite, out of wisdom. Because when someone shows you that they're willing to erase your independence, rewrite your life, and call it help, you don't let them hold the pen again. You hold it yourself. The house has been quieter lately, but it's a different kind of quiet now, not the heavy, suffocating silence of being ignored, dismissed, or tolerated. No, this quiet is mine, and it is peaceful. After they left that rainy afternoon, they didn't come back. Not the next day, not the week after. No calls, no texts, just silence. At first I thought I might break. I had spent years, decades, tying my identity to their needs, their schedules, their opinions of me. Without them reaching out, I feared I might vanish entirely. But something unexpected happened. I didn't disappear. I started to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone they could control with guilt and half smiles. I began to piece together the version of myself I had buried so long ago, the one who had dreams, thoughts, preferences, opinions, the one who used to hum while cooking, the one who liked painting, even if her hands trembled a little now. I made small changes at first. I moved the couch to where I actually liked it, not where it had been practical. I opened the curtains in rooms I had stopped using. I let the light in. I started walking every morning, slowly, deliberately, breathing in air that didn't need permission from anyone. I unpacked a box of old photographs I hadn't touched in years. There were moments in those pictures where I barely recognized myself. The girl with bright eyes, the woman who stood tall in her wedding dress, the young mother holding a baby with such hope. I wept for her, but not out of pity, out of respect. She had tried so hard to be enough for everyone, and now it was time to be enough for herself. I took the documents my son had wanted me to sign and shredded them every single page. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to my lawyer. A new will. Clear. Precise. Honest. I even added a handwritten note at the bottom. No one speaks for me, but me. I cleaned out the glove box of the new car I bought in my name this time and left something there again. But this time, it wasn't an envelope of legal secrets or proof of betrayal. It was a small folded piece of paper that said, "You are not invisible. Not anymore." I left it for myself, a reminder for days when doubt tries to creep back in. They still haven't called. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're waiting for me to be the one who reaches out first to apologize, to explain, to make things easier. But I won't. Because I've finally understood something that took me far too long to learn. Love is not loyalty to abuse. Forgiveness does not mean returning to harm. And silence isn't strength if it's used to protect someone else's comfort at the cost of your soul. For years, I gave applause without ever receiving any. I clapped for birthdays I planned, but wasn't thanked for. I celebrated milestones that came with no acknowledgement of what I sacrificed to make them possible. I stood in the background of my own life, proud of them, even as they erased me. But I don't need their applause anymore. I wake up in the morning and make my bed, not because someone is coming over to see the house, but because it makes me feel good. I cook dinner for one not out of loneliness, but out of freedom, because no one criticizes what I choose to eat anymore. I watch movies that make me cry. I sing in the kitchen when the kettle whistles. I talk to my husband sometimes, not out loud, but in the way only someone who has loved deeply can understand. And I imagine him nodding, smiling proud that I finally remembered how to live. I've joined a book club. I take classes at the community centre, nothing fancy, just enough to remind my brain that it's still curious. I made a friend. Her name doesn't matter here, but she's kind. We laugh. We share stories. She listens without judging, and I do the same for her. There is life after betrayal. There is peace after chaos. And there is power in not needing to be seen in order to be whole. Sometimes I still drive by my son's house. Not on purpose, really. It's just on the way to the grocery store. His car is usually there, lights on, life moving forward. And once, just once, I heard laughter spilling out from the windows, his children's voices. My grandchildren. A sound that once would have pierced me like glass. But now I smiled. Not because I was part of it, but because I didn't have to be. Their laughter didn't belong to me anymore. It didn't have to. It wasn't my job to hold everyone together. It never really was. I'm still healing. That doesn't stop. There are days when I wonder if I did the right thing, if I could have spoken up sooner, softer, differently. But then I remember I did speak. I did act. I chose me. And after a lifetime of being the last one I thought about, that is enough. No, I never needed their applause. I only ever needed my own permission to stop clapping for people who never looked back at me. And now that I have it,